People continue to want to put Russell Westbrook in the city of Charlotte. How legitimate are those chances? We'll talk about that. Plus, we'll finish our conversation with Richard Stamen of Locked On NBA Big Board. That's all today on the Locked On Hornets podcast.
You are Locked On Hornets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
In a minute, cuz we live.
It's Locked On Hornets. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day. Thanks for joining us and bring home a slam dunk. Introducing NBA Jam Shaq Edition from Arcade 1UP. Pre-order now to play with Legends. Arcade 1UP is the place for authentic gaming experiences featuring licensed retro games from the golden age of arcades.
Boom shakalaka.
I once talked to that guy, Tim Kitzrow. He does a lot of these like car wash type of interviews with everybody where he's just bang, pumping out content. And his whole shtick is just doing all of those sound bites throughout the interview. So you can ask him a question, hey, where are you from? And he'll say, boom shakalaka, I'm from wherever the hell. That's the way he rolls. But Tim Kitzrow, shout out to NBA Jam Shaq Edition, awesome edition from Arcade 1UP. Thanks for making us your first listen. We're free and available everywhere you get your podcast. That includes YouTube, where we just broke the barrier of 2,000 subscribers.
Thank you to
Awesome
all the
stuff.
people.
Yeah, that's
got us there.
Yeah, so good. I mean, we were up in November. We're up at 2,000 subscribers now. We had some bee costumes, some face paint along the way. If you go to Facebook, you like us 1,000 times. We'll even have Doug put on a grandmama costume. If we get to 500 likes, then we're going to bring back the Matt Geiger fact of the day. So
here's my thing.
Got a whole bunch of stuff.
Facebook accounts are free, okay? How much do you want this? How much do you want to see me in a grandmama outfit? Make a fake Facebook account. Come on, everybody's doing it. It's like the thing now to do. Make a fake Facebook account and do something good with it. Don't try to steal an election. Don't try to mess with an election like the Russians did. Do something productive with it, like make me dress like grandmama.
I don't think everybody's making a fake Facebook account. I think you just accused that, but that's fine. No, I don't think so. But you can. Nothing is stopping you. You can do that. You see it on Catfish all the time, except just use this Catfish account to like Facebook.
Yeah,
like Locked On Hornets.
That's what I'm saying.
Facebook.
Make a Catfish account, but don't use it for evil. That's what I'm saying. Don't use it for evil. Use it for good, which is to make me dress up like grandmama.
Yeah, don't dupe some, love-lost person that just desperately wants a significant other. That is a remarkably small cup of coffee.
You like that?
That is. What is?
Well,
what is that?
Well,
doesn't even work.
Yeah.
Is that Cuban coffee?
Of course, yes, it's coffee. I don't know if I can dip the cup down. Yeah, you can say it's coffee. It's an espresso cup, but I have just regular coffee in it. I'm trying to reduce my coffee consumption.
Okay.
Getting the jitters a little bit in the afternoon. I'm not getting a lot of sleep, and so I've been like counteracting that with coffee. Anyway, we're getting way off. We got plenty to talk about. But yes, the coffee cup is comically small.
Did you get that from your baby's doll set? That's what I want to know.
Well, I feel like a giant,
Yeah, it's nice. Pinky out. Sip your extremely tiny cup of coffee. You look great. You look chic. You look.
This is what you get with YouTube, folks.
Yeah, you would see this is the world's smallest cup of coffee. All right, let's talk about these Russell Westbrook rumors because Kevin O'Connor is at it again. He's the guy. Damn you, KOC. Trying to put Russell Westbrook in the city of Charlotte, trying to get rid of Gordon Hayward and Terry Rozier, which honestly, that's fine. But don't do that and put Russell Westbrook alongside LaMelo Ball. So he takes the basketball out of LaMelo Ball's hand. If you don't know what I'm talking about, if you go to Twitter, you can see KOC start to continue to talk about this trade where you would send Terry Rozier and Gordon Hayward to the Lakers in exchange for Russell Westbrook. And Eric Barnes, who I believe interacts with us sometimes on Locked On Hornets, so shout out to Eric. If that's not true, then I'll still give you a shout out. It doesn't matter. KOC said, would you rather keep Russ into the season or trade Russ now to Charlotte for Hayward and Rozier? Keeping Russ into the season opens more potential opportunities for trades than might be available this offseason. He was talking about the Lakers' benefits. Eric Barnes puts out KOC, you got to know Charlotte's never doing that trade, yet you want to appeal to the Lakers fan base and give them hope. You're selling dreams. KOC said, not true. Fact. If Bridges is retained, Hornets want to move long-term salary. It's about best setting the organization up for years to come, not just this upcoming season. I'll let you put your thoughts out there first on what Kevin O'Connor had to say about this quote-unquote potential deal.
I think they have to explore options. I think the team has to explore options to move salary if they are going to retain Bridges for $25 million or for $30 million or for whatever the number ends up being. Because with Bridges at $25 million, you're already over the cap. So you've got to then get creative in terms of retaining PJ Washington, or when you eventually get into the LaMelo discussions. So it behooves them to try to move off some of this long-term money with assets like, Terry Rozier. I mean, Terry Rozier's in for another 4 years, and pairing him alongside LaMelo Ball, unless there's some significant defensive improvement from one or both of those players, doesn't really make any sense long-term. And Terry Rozier off the bench, I don't know if that makes sense long-term. So they've got to explore these things. But I am a little like frustrated by the idea of the Hornets continuing to set up the organization for years to come. It just feels like this organization has been doing that forever. I'm ready for this team to compete. I think that should be the primary focus. If along the way they can also achieve the goal of loosening up the books to bring in additional talent, but you got the Golden State Warriors are proving it right now. You spend money to win championships, and so it's just they've been spending money in the wrong places. So how can they get off this money and then spend it in the right places?
The macro idea of this is fine, that you want to get off of Gordon Hayward's 2 years left on his deal and Terry Rozier's 4 left on his contract that he signed. That's a fine enough assumption to think that the Hornets might want to do that. Okay, for sure. Not for Russell Westbrook, even if he only has 1 more year left on his deal, because you can't punt on this season. And that's what Kevin O'Connor doesn't address. He can say it's all about the long-term future success. That's still true. But you can't punt on next season, especially when you fire James Borrego because you just got destroyed in the last 2 play-in games, and you haven't reached a playoff, any type of playoff series since the Miami Heat series where Purple Shirt Guy comes in and ruins it in Game 7, but also Dwayne Wade has a little part in that. That was it. That's the last time you've had postseason success. It was that, and then it was the other time against the Orlando Magic when the Bobcats reached the playoffs. I mean, those are the only 2 playoff appearances that you really have to not even brag about, but to look at. So LaMelo Ball will be in his 3rd season next year. Mm-hmm. By that season's conclusion, he will be extension eligible. Mm-hmm. And it is going to be important to put something attractive in front of LaMelo, say, hey, stay here in Charlotte because we're building something the right way. And if you bring Russell Westbrook in because you're punting on winning, how does that help? Like that's the whole problem with all of this. If you want to move off of Terry and Gordon, fine. But there's got to be another way to explore. And if not, then this deal isn't worth it. This deal isn't worth it.
Yeah, well, whatever your feelings are towards Terry Rozier, especially because he was a big contributor for the Hornets last year, and Gordon Hayward has the potential to be a significant contributor for this team if healthy. And
really an availability question for Gordon.
Yeah,
not that
sure,
he sucks.
Totally. But moving both of those players in exchange for Westbrook, who at best, you find an opportunity to not play him and pay him to not play, but I think at worst he ends up playing and could be a significant detriment to the development of LaMelo Ball, in my opinion. So I think this would be a long-term bad move for the Hornets because your long-term future really hinges on convincing LaMelo Ball that this is a place that can legitimately win a championship. And I don't know if that particular move is a great start to that argument.
Well, and it's a good point. It is important to speak under the context that Russell Westbrook plays for the Hornets. If you can move off of Russell by buying that contract out, there are other moves to be made after this one, then fine. But also that idea of paying him not to play, that invites just so much distraction, so much controversy. Again, going back to your point that it would really, I think, nuke the season. I don't like it. Plus, Terry Rozier, as much as I don't love the contract for Terry, I don't think that it goes south as soon as next season. It's nice to capitalize on what has to be his max value for this deal. I can't imagine you get that doesn't get better as the contract goes on, just because I think this is the ceiling in which Terry Rozier can provide for a team, if that makes sense. The only reason that contract gets more attractive is because the years come off of it. But it's not because Terry has this other gear to hit. This is peak Terry, and it's good. He's helping the team. But it's not going to take place over the next 4 years. I also don't think it's going to go so south where you can't move off of it this upcoming season. Gordon's gets worse by the day because he's older. He's past 30. We know about his injury history. Still, if Russell Westbrook plays for this team in that trade, then that's not the one that I'm willing to pull the trigger on. All right. Speaking of some vets, how will these vets for the Charlotte Hornets maybe pair up with some of the rookies that are in the NBA draft? Coming up next on the Locked On Hornets podcast. We will finish our conversation with Richard Stamen. We've had a couple of segments throughout the last week. We will finish it up with a name game, put a whole bunch of prospects in front of his face. He picks which one he likes better and also which one he likes better for the Charlotte Hornets. I just talked about NBA Jam. You heard Doug, boom shakalaka. We have big news. The one, the only NBA Jam, it's back. Arcade 1UP, the leader in at-home retro arcade games, is not only bringing the best game ever back, but they've made it bigger than ever with a, wait for it, Shaq Edition machine. People are obsessed with them, NBA Jam. I'm thrilled to tell our listeners that you can once again play hoops with NBA legends in this arcade classic. Jump clear across the court, set the ball on fire, all that good stuff, and one of the first sports games ever to feature real and digitized NBA licensed teams. No fouls, no free throws. It's so good. No quarters required. Compete with
the
friends
opposite
and
of the
family.
NBA Finals.
That's true. It's exactly that. And compete with friends and family through all new Wi-Fi leaderboards, making you more connected than ever, too. Pre-order now from arcade1up.com. That's arcade, the number 1, up.com for an estimated early September ship date. Arcade 1UP is the place for fun. They've got even more classics like Golden Tee, Mortal Kombat, and many others starting at just $399. Check this out. They are giving away an NBA Jam Shaq Edition to a Locked On listener. Enter for a chance to win a game console for your man cave at arcade1up.com/locked on. That's arcade, the number 1, up.com/locked on. You've got till July 8th to enter to win NBA Jam Shaq Edition console. Don't miss out. Enter today. Who are you going to play with? All right, we'll finish up our conversation with Richard Stamen coming up next on the Locked On Hornets podcast.
This is Locked On Hornets.
All right, so we've got Al, or we've got the question how. Like, how did Myles do that? Can you help us end this debate with so much, an unbelievable amount on the line?
Doug, I respect you to the nth degree, but Walker, I'm telling you, it was just, every single person who saw that reacted that way. Some of us just are tight, tighter than others, and I just had to release this from my body.
It's time for more of the Locked On Hornets podcast.
Richard Stamen of Locked On NBA Big Board joining us for one final segment to talk about all of these prospects. He liked what we did in the ultimate mock draft. We talked a little bit about the big guys, why Walker Kessler is ranked in the 70s for him, but why Mark Williams doesn't really have, it's not a huge gap between him and Jalen Duren. So either one of those guys would be a good fit for the Charlotte Hornets. Let's ask some cliche questions, some questions I'm sure you've answered a million times at this point in the draft process. We talked about being scared of fallers, right? Somebody that's projected to go top 10, and then maybe they're selected at 25 for some reason, guys that fall to the second. Who is potentially that player who you think could be that biggest faller in this year's draft?
Yeah, I think it's Patrick Baldwin Jr. I think he takes the cake. He's somebody who I would say is most recently is April. He was still a guy mocked around 20 or so, around where the Hornets traded back for in the ultimate mock draft. And I think he might go in the 40s. It really wouldn't surprise me. I don't know anything that has been good that has come out for him in the last 2 months.
Who's the most likely to fall out of the lottery that is projected right now to be in the lottery?
Tari Eason. I think he's head and shoulders for the reasons we talked about earlier, just that basketball IQ, the off the court potential concerns just about him, motor, things like that. Just the overall intangibles I think might drive him out of the lottery.
Yeah. So Who's the player you're most unsure about yourself, Richard? Like it's just hard to get a grip on. You think they're going to be good, but man, if they just can't get this one skill set, it might never work out for them. Who's the player that comes to mind?
Yeah, it's always the one skill that throws me off, and that's shooting. And there's two players that come to mind: Dyson Daniels from the G League Ignite, because I don't know how much I trust his shot, and then Jeremy Sohan, because I do not trust his shot at all. And I don't think he's that great of an athlete, but he has everything else that you would want in a player. So it's really hard to figure those skills out, like what's a fatal flaw and what's a limiter.
Go ahead, Doug. Before the name game. Go ahead.
Well, we just asked him, who's the toughest player to get a grip on. I would like to know literally who is the tough. You've seen a lot of players, and these guys sweat, okay? And so what I would like to know is, of these players, who would be literally the most difficult to get your hands around, to get a grip on because they're so sweaty?
Oh, no, this is so easy. Do y'all remember the story about Paolo Banchero sweating multiple pounds?
I do, actually.
Yeah,
all right.
He sweats like multiple pounds a game or something off. Easily him. I would not want to go near that guy. Like, there's a reason he's so unguardable. Maybe it's not his skill set.
That's true.
Well, I mean, I think he's got a deodorant commercial in his future, number one. Number two, that could actually be an issue. I don't know if you remember this one. So this is kind of funny because you look like this player, Cody Zeller, which we've mentioned before on the show. If you're not watching on YouTube, this guy is a dead ringer for the Zeller family. He looks like the fourth Zeller. I think there are three of them, right? Yeah, I'm pretty sure there were three of them. You're the fourth Zeller. And but Cody Zeller used to sweat a lot and wasn't drinking enough water, and at one point had to be out a few games because he was so dehydrated that was affecting his health. So you got to watch that sweat.
Yeah, I like Doug's contributions over the last couple of segments have been pedigree, and it's been to make sure you drink water, and you got yourself an NBA draft prospect. Are you ready to play the name game, Richard? You ready to do this with us? All right.
Let's do this.
So the name game, it will be like kind of semi-rapid fire. We have a few minutes left to go in the segment. I did want to start with my dilemma at the 20th pick, the ultimate mock draft. And so two guys that I like were available. Jalen Williams and Blake Wesley was the other consideration that I had there. I like Blake Wesley. I think defensively, he's really good, has the capability, right? But again, Jalen is probably my favorite player, just favorite prospect, not best, but favorite in the draft. So we'll start with that one, head to head, Jalen Williams or Blake Wesley.
I'm going Jalen Williams. He doesn't have a fatal flaw like Blake Wesley potentially could with that jump shot.
What about Jalen Williams or Ochai Agbaji?
I think I'm going Ochai Agbaji. I've been a big fan since he took off his red shirt in his freshman year, and I realized the delivery of what I just said, but as you're literally wearing a red shirt.
Yeah, that's correct. I'm not a red shirt, but I am wearing one.
But he's just so athletic. I think his defense is a motor issue, not necessarily a skill issue. Like, it's hard being the first option and playing defense in college. But I think he suits just the NBA role of off-ball player. I think he's an elite shooter, and elite shooters that have great athleticism or just general feel for the game, they stick in this league. And we look at like Desmond Bane, he was picked at 30, top 5 player in the draft. Ochai is going to be a borderline top 10 player in this draft.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I'd like to play the name game too, if you don't mind.
I was going to try to reel you in as the leader, but of course you interrupted again. Go ahead, Doug.
Thank you. Okay. I'm serious. I'm a serious person, and I have serious name game here. You ready?
Yes.
Teen Wolf versus Billy Hoyle from White Men Can't Jump.
Well, look, you're going up against a superhero. There's clearly a better player, but if you want to be someone, I'd rather be Billy Hoyle, I think.
I didn't ask you. I asked our draft expert. Are you drafting Teen Wolf or are you drafting Billy Hoyle?
I don't know. I mean, Billy wasn't exactly a good decision maker.
It's true. But also, do you want to be a werewolf? I guess that's the trade-off, right? Like, would you rather be a werewolf or would you rather just make some bad decisions in life?
Well, I mean, it depends. Is the werewolf like a good decision maker? That's really the big difference maker for me.
He can literally jump out of the gym, Richard. Like, he doesn't need to be a decision. The decision is jump from the three-point line.
Well, the problem was I don't think that he was quite aware of the decisions he was making while he was the Teen Wolf. I think that was part of the issue.
You said aware, by the way. That was pretty nice on your part. Let's get back to the real.
He wasn't a werewolf, if you know what I mean. I mean, he was surfing on cars. I mean, how could you, That's some questionable decision making.
For sure. All right, let's get back to the game. Ochai Agbaji or Malachi Branham. I love Branham too, Richard. Like, that was a guy that was taken 14th in the mock draft. What do you think about those two head to head?
That's a tough one because I think I have them back to back on my big board. So that is a very difficult.
You can go fit with the Hornets if that makes sense. Like, if that's a different qualifier for you.
Yeah, I would say if that's the tiebreaker, I'm going Ochai Agbaji. Again, I just think you look at a guy who could potentially play defense, can shoot the lights out at any motion. I think that's going to be a difference maker. Malachi Branham's the raw upside guy, but Ochai is the guy who you plug and play for years.
So I have a couple more.
Lewis Scott from Celtic Pride, the 1996 movie where he was kidnapped by Dan Aykroyd and the other bad guy from Home Alone, versus Air Bud. Who you drafting?
Man, I honestly don't know the first one. I'm going Air Bud. And also Air Bud is like a generation.
You gotta go back and watch Celtic Pride. It may be problematic any movie from the 90s, you have to be careful, but I remember enjoying it. 5.3 on IMDb though, so maybe watch out.
Yeah, I'm going with the generational athlete.
Judd Apatow, story by Judd Apatow, screenplay by Judd Apatow. Wow, a little early Apatow movie. Anyway, what were we talking about?
All right, Richard. The next one I'm going to go with. I know you were worried about the shot for Dyson Daniels. So with that worry being there, is that enough for you to also pick Agbaji here?
This is unpopular. I think, I know there are times where I think I should go against my gut, and this is probably one of them. I'm going to stick with my gut, though, and be wrong. And I'm going to go with Ochai Agbaji. I'm not too confident, but again, he has just that elite skill. So I go with him.
All right, two more then. We're going to try to go up the board and make you think about it.
I have one more as well.
Ultimately go. Well, yeah, let me get at least this one in first.
All right.
What about Johnny Davis or Ochai Agbaji? Who you're taking between those two guys?
That's
Still?
Also back to back on my board. I have Johnny Davis by a hair, because I think he has self-creation ability. Okay,
defense. Doug, get your last one in.
All right, so I have, let's see here. I'm scrolling. Well, this will be a good one. So how about like the kid from Like Mike, Little Bow Wow? I don't know what I'm trying to get his character.
It's actual Michael Jordan's abilities. That's going to be tough to beat. The shoes come with Michael Jordan's talent.
Right. So Bow Wow is Calvin Cambridge from Little Mike, Like Mike. Thank you. Did he play for the Nets? No, he played for the
Knights. He played for the LA Knights. Yeah.
All right. So Like Mike getting his powers from the shoes versus Michael Jordan from Space Jam.
Qualifier question. Is this Michael Jordan when he walks in the gym and is still wearing a suit and gets bounced around by the Monstars, or is this in the actual game where he actually uses his steroids?
Yeah. Whoa, the steroid. That's a bold accusation. You just accused. This is going to be on Locked On Sports today. Richard Statement just accused Michael Jordan of taking steroids.
We've been aggregated before, Richard. So
it was special stuff, which I think is what Miles Bridges was drinking in his double cup.
Secret stuff.
No, this is Michael Jordan in his prime versus Like Mike in the shoes.
No, I think it's easily Michael Jordan. Like Mike didn't face real competition.
That's true. Play for the Knights.
It's a good point. But Calvin Cambridge, I guess, did. Dirk Nowitzki asked Calvin for his autograph in that movie. Final one, Johnny Davis.
Gerald Wallace was in that movie, by the way.
Gerald Wallace is also great. Would you rather go with Johnny Davis or AJ Griffin, who seems to be also kind of sliding and being a little bit all over the place in these mock drafts?
Man, if both hit, it's AJ Griffin. The problem is I don't know if both hit. I think Johnny Davis is pretty safe. He's a weird guy because a lot of people have just started to really sour on him because he peaked in the season early. AJ Griffin was the opposite and started the season actually terribly because he was still coming off the injury. He couldn't really play more than 20 minutes a game. But you look at how he closed the season, I think he gained some of that explosiveness back. A lot of people talk about his defense, for example. They say, oh, he was horrible on defense, which for the most part is right. But I think a lot of it had to do with the injury. You look at him in an NBA pace and environment, and I think he actually holds up pretty well with his frame and athleticism. And then on offense, great shooter, and I think he really knows how to attack closeouts and pass off of those drives, and I think that's a big separator for him.
All right. Sounds good. That's Richard Stamen just putting up with all of our foolishness here on the Locked On
I feel
Hornets
informed.
podcast.
I feel enlightened. I think we got a lot done here. I think we decided a lot. Yeah, thank you, Richard.
Please go listen to Locked On NBA Big Board. Please go follow him on Twitter.
Do it.
At
I'm
Mavs
serious.
Draft.
I've been mildly threatening you in these
Yeah.
previous segments, but I'm serious. Subscribe to Locked On NBA Big Board. I'm coming to your house.
Yeah, and we I mean, look, you don't even want to. You don't want any of that based off what you heard today.
I'm gonna go to your house and I'm going to just yell into your windows asking you name games for fictional basketball players.
Maybe that you've never seen before. Richard, thank you for putting up with all of that. You've been great throughout the entire snippets that we've been putting out there. Thanks once again.
Sidney Dean versus Joanna Man.
Thank you, Richard. I appreciate it. Thank you for putting up with all of that.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Okay. God, you made this so awkward, Doug. It's unreal. That's Doug Branson, also of the Locked On Hornets podcast. And that's Richard Staben. Make sure you go check him out. Locked On NBA Big Board, also at Mavs Draft. Thanks to everybody for putting up with this. Hopefully you learned a little bit about the NBA draft prospects, playing the name game, the big guys that are available for possibly the Hornets to select at 13 or 15. Make sure you stick with us throughout the rest of the week here on the Locked On Hornets podcast. Thanks again to Richard Stamen. Some fun stuff from him coming up next on the Locked On Hornets podcast. We'll recap some of Richard Stamen's thoughts. We'll also get to Montrezl Harrell in the news, and there's another Jake Fisher piece of information regarding the Charlotte Hornets, as there always is every single week this offseason. We'll talk about all of that coming up next on the Locked On Hornets podcast. Not before we talk about Rock Auto, though, a longtime partner of the podcast network. This episode is brought to you by Rock Auto. With the ever-increasing numbers of makes and models, it's now impossible for your local chain auto parts store to stock all the parts you need. Why endure often pointless or seemingly intimidating questioning? You don't have to do that anymore. Save time and money when using Rock Auto. It's a family business serving do-it-yourselfers for over 20 years. Go to rockauto.com right now. See all the parts available for your car or your truck, right? Locked On in there. How did you hear about us box? So they know that we sent you. They have an amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. Visit rockauto.com. One last segment to go on the Locked On Hornets podcast.
This is Locked On Hornets.
Then I clicked on M. Thomas. I'm like, who in the hell is M. Thomas? Matt Thomas is his name.
Oh, NBA legend Matty Thomas. Matt
he didn't play
Thomas.
at all.
I'm pretty sure Matt Thomas served me at an Applebee's the other day.
It's time for more of the Locked On Hornets podcast.
Finishing up Locked On Hornets, an excellent segment from Richard Stamen, and Doug just tried to put a firework, just put a whole bunch of flares, boom, boom, pay attention to me, and completely derail the segment. Thank you,
It wasn't about me. It was about settling some debates. It's about the listener. The listener wanted to know. I'm just serving the listener every day.
When they came in to check out Air Bud to see if he would be a good Hornets prospect.
I think we learned a lot, honestly.
I think you're right. I actually think, yes, sarcastically and also truthfully, very legitimately so. I think you're right. One of the things about him, Richard Stamen, I think the guy that he's highest on compared to maybe general consensus is Ochai Agbaji. And, where I think it seems like the consensus probably has him around like 13 or 15. We threw a lot of names at him, and he chose Agbaji over a lot of those names. I forget, who exactly we broke him with, right? There was finally somebody that we put there that he chose the other player, but it took a while. And the way I constructed that was I was, trying to be in the same neighborhood, right, of where guys were going, and he still just kept choosing Agbaji. Very real play for the Charlotte Hornets, Doug. Thing is, I'm not as high on Agbaji as Richard Stamen is. What would you feel if you saw Abaji's name called out as the Hornets' 13th or 15th pick?
I think as the 15th pick, it makes sense. I'm not sure that it makes a ton of sense at 13 over names like Mark Williams or Jalen Duren. I would be much higher on those players than Agbaji, but I wouldn't be upset with it. I mean, Agbaji is someone, high basketball IQ, has some defensive tools, knows a lot about the game, can come in and immediately contribute. And the Hornets have issues with wing defense, and I think he could come in and be one of those pieces that you need to win a play-in game, to win in the playoffs. I mean, he feels like that kind of piece that's going to be in the league for a long time. not really certain he's going to be any kind of star in the league. But you're watching in the NBA Finals now. You need all of these little pieces to make up the whole, and I think Agbaji, as guaranteed as you can be about any of this, I feel like he's a guarantee, somebody that's going to be in the league for a long time.
Yes, I think when people give the 3-and-D tab to players coming out of the draft, it often limits their upside. And I think that happened with, a guy that I love, Devin Vassell. It's like, oh, he's a 3-and-D guy, who cares? But, I really thought there was a lot more to his game. I thought he was a good passer. I thought he could put the ball on the deck and actually create for himself. With Ochai Agbaji, I do think that is just strictly 3-and-D. He doesn't have the handles that I like. I think, Stamen thinks some of the defensive issues, especially team defense, are coachable. And it's probably true. The problem is, like, when you bake that into him being a 4-year player at Kansas, like, I think that loses a little bit when you talk about an 18, 19, 20-year-old coming out of college saying, hey, they have time to actually work on this. That should have probably been worked out, at least to some degree, in college. And so those are some of the reservations that I have. He can shoot. There's no doubt about that. I don't think he can pass very well, right? Like, I think it's very strictly defense and three-point shooting that Agbaji is going to contribute. And so those are just some of the reasons I like a Malachi Branham, a couple of these other guys a little better. But the name game, Johnny Davis, would be very interesting. He likes Johnny Davis. And even with all that being said, go back to the first segment that we played with Richard Stamen. He said he liked the Mark Williams pick with Agbaji on the board. He's like, look, this is very good. Like, it fills a need. He really likes Mark Williams too. He's probably higher on him than a lot of people are. So yeah, ultimately, it looks like you might have some pretty decent options if you're the Hornets.
Yeah, the real problem with the Agbaji pick at either 13 or 15 is that, from my perspective, the Hornets are playing with a little bit of house money at this point with this 13th and 15th pick, right? Because they've got two players in James Bouknight and Kai Jones that they really don't know what they have because they didn't play a lot last season. You've got JT Thor, who you do actually know can legitimately be like a good defensive player for you down the line, or maybe even as soon as next season. So they've got a lot that they've got to work through the system right now, right? So 13 and 15 feels a little house money. Why wouldn't you take a bit more of a risk there with at least one of those picks? You may not even make both of those picks, but if you are going to make both of those picks, then I feel like one has to be looking for that Giannis opportunity, and Agbaji is not going to be a Giannis opportunity.
Well, speaking of that 15th pick, Jake Fisher put out there in his column where he kind of updates everybody on what he's hearing throughout that week leading up to the NBA draft, leading up to free agency. Yes, we have another Myles Turner storyline. At least it's been a while. At least we've not talked about him for like a month or so, something like that, which is actually pretty long.
Forgot about Myles Turner.
Yeah, Myles Turner, just like Frank Vogel, those Indiana guys we'll forget about sometimes. But Myles Turner, Jake Fisher mentioned that's all, Charlotte's always long considered been a potential landing spot for Myles. And he also mentions that the Hornets are willing to move off of that 15th overall selection. And I'm telling you right now, I would have no problem trading the 15th overall pick for Myles Turner. I don't know if that alone gets it done. So what else would you contribute there? Do you give do you go 45 and 15? And is that enough to get it done? Do you go, do you want to go Kai Jones, or do you want to go James Bouknight? And then, that's what you really have to consider. And that would be quite a bit, right? A former first-round pick, another first-round selection here to trade for Myles Turner. Those are going to be some discussions to be had. What do you make of Myles Turner rearing his head again on the possible trade block in order for Charlotte to pursue?
This is nothing unique about Myles Turner. This is any decent center prospect that people feel like the Hornets would have a shot at versus some other teams. So these names, Rashawn Holmes, all of these guys are just going to pop up in all of these rumors. Now, I was looking to see if the Pacers have a trade exception to make that swap without any compensation. They do, and multiple trade exceptions. So this could work for the
I forget where those come from. Yeah.
Well, Doug McDermott, Edmund Sumner, Jeremy Lamb trade. So they've got a $7 million. I don't know how it works in terms of combining, but they do have some trade exceptions. So it's possible that kind of thing works. to move Myles Turner. It's interesting. I mean, yeah, if you're not sending any young talent, I'm cool with it. I suppose the 15th pick again. I think if it was their only first round pick, I would be hesitant, but they do have the 13th pick. If it's the 15th pick straight up for him and that works and all of the CBA machinations, then I'm okay with it. That's like one of the rare scenarios where I would be okay with it because I am concerned about the injury and, about what you would have to invest in him long term.
Well, and again, right, like you're, talking about matching salaries. Sometimes when I talk about trades, I forget the matching salary part. Like I'm talking about the actual exchanging of value. You could put a Kelly Oubre there. You could put Mason Plumlee there, whatever you need to do to match the salaries that Hornets don't really care about losing. But the value going out, Book Knight, Kai Jones, and that 15th pick, maybe the 13th pick, right? Like it's only 2 selections down, if you would get out of the lottery, but only barely. So, maybe that would be something they'd want to move off of too. All right, speaking of centers, Doug, last thing we'll touch on here before we end today. Montrezl Harrell in the news today, in the news yesterday. So this was written on the Charlotte Observer. Rod Boone had this article. Montrezl Harrell facing a felony drug charge in Kentucky after police said they found 3 pounds of marijuana in his car during a traffic stop. To continue on, he said Harrell was pulled over by a Kentucky state trooper near Richmond around 10 a.m. on May 12th. So this has been in the game for about a month now. After he was allegedly following the car in front of him too closely, the officer said he, quote, observed odor of marijuana from the car. And Harrell then admitted to being in possession of marijuana and produced a small amount in his sweatpants. That's a quote right here from the report. Officers then searched the car. Harrell had rented this car. Then they found 3 pounds of weed in vacuum sealed bags in a backpack in the back seat. So, he was charged with trafficking less than 5 pounds of marijuana. That's a Class D felony in the state. It's punishable by up to 5 years in prison, fine up to $10,000. Scheduled to be arraigned on Monday morning in Madison County, which sits just south of Lexington. That's some of the write-up in the Charlotte Observer. Look, man, the Hornets have been in the news, with this Miles Bridges thing where he posted a picture of what looks like lean, but we're not exactly sure what it is, right? Montrezl Harrell now, he gets busted with 3 pounds of marijuana in his car. There's a few things to get to here, to be honest with you, Doug. Like, okay, so, I don't care personally. Like, you can come at me all you want to. Like, yeah, don't have 3 pounds of weed in your car, for sure. Don't do that. Like, Montrezl Harrell has a ton of money, don't want to put yourself in that situation. At the same time, do I personally care they had 3 pounds of weed in his car? I just can't get there. I just can't get to the point where I care. Go ahead, Doug. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, in a vacuum, I don't care. I think
in a vacuum sealed bag.
I think as an organization, well, I don't even honestly, whatever. I mean, if it's.
It was a joke. Yeah, right.
Yeah, it's the vacuum sealed bag that really pulled. Actually, it's the following too close. Honestly, I think they should throw away the key on that. Like, I hate when people follow me too close. It's one of the things, my biggest pet peeve on the road. People follow me too close. Like, get off my booty. And no, but seriously. So I don't care about it in a vacuum whether he had weed or not. What I think I care about from an organizational standpoint is you can't have players committing felonies. Like, you have to understand what the law is and what you can and can't get away with. So I think that's the big problem. I will say this. I put the chances of Montrezl Harrell returning as a Charlotte Hornet pretty low before this. I would put that at about 0% now. It didn't look good because Harrell expressed frustration at the end of the season with how he was used. And he was a midseason trade, and it didn't look like he had any prospect of starting next season, in my opinion. So, and it looked like he wanted to start. So I had said, it's not very likely he comes back. Now I'd say that's going to set it probably 0.
When we had this conversation with Miles, too, it's very different, right? This guy, Montrezl Harrell got busted with it just straight up, and it's completely different what we insinuate, right? Lean, very different than weed, even if you do have a large amount of weed on you at the time, if you're Montrezl Harrell. The thing being, it's like, I don't know how much this is going to affect either one of these guys. Have we already forgotten about Miles at this point? Did they issue a drug test? Because the NBA had that power. If you have something reasonable to go off of, which it kind of did, then then you're allowed to put that test out there. And who knows if that happened? Who knows if it's going to happen? I'm not exactly sure, but we don't have anything on that front. Thing with Montrezl Harrell is like we have this Class D felony. And
take away. I don't care about any of the moral things or things that you think about weed or any of that. There is one like irresponsibility kind of thing that you could tag onto it and say, again, don't commit a felony, or maybe know that that's a felony and then don't do it. Okay, there's that piece. Okay, but even let's strip away that for a second. And say there's this idea that you got to decide whether you want to give Montrezl Harrell more money and more years, and he could possibly be going to prison for 3 years, 5 years. So to me, that's what I'm saying. Like if there was any opportunity for Montrezl Harrell to come back, I think it sits comfortably at 0 in my mind.
Yeah, especially with Charlotte just wanting to move on anyway. But man, yeah, that's a lot. That's a lot of weed. You know, to have 3 pounds on you in those bags. Some people just like to keep a lot on them, man. That's just how it is.
I don't know. Listen, I don't know enough to speak on it. Don't commit felonies. I think that's going to be I'm going to retreat into the corner, the easy corner.
Can you put it on the crawl before we end today? Do you have enough time? Don't commit felonies.
The hottest take I have is don't commit. I don't even know what Class D means in the felony, but D in my mind means don't, as in class don't commit a felony.
It doesn't stand
it's going
for
to
due.
hurt your opportunities to continue to make money in the NBA, I think. Even, the NBA is easing up on testing, or I guess they're not testing for marijuana anymore, and it's being legalized in more states. I get it. It's just we're not all the way there yet. And there has to be some recognition that we're not all the way there yet. And you have to understand, especially if you're like traveling between states, you've got to understand what's going on there. So,
well, yeah, and especially I saw Nada talking about this on Twitter too. Like he was in L.A. and then he was in Washington where it's decriminalized, and then he ends up in Charlotte. He's driving through Kentucky. Remember, he went to school at Louisville, so you have to think there's a connection there. And he just got caught in a state where it's not really going to fly, like maybe it might in other states. So yeah, Montrezl Harrell, man, I hate to see it, but this happened, and we're bringing it up here after a Charlotte Observer write-up takes place, really a month after again, so this has kind of been in the game for a little while now. All right, that'll do it for the Locked On Hornets podcast, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Thanks for joining us, as you always do. Make your second listen Locked On NBA Big Board. Host Rafael Barlow from NBA Draft Junkies and author of the NBA Big Board newsletter is joined by Richard Stamen, Sam Ferris, and Leaf Tulin, giving fans an in-depth look into the NBA Draft, the mock draft, player rankings, and of course, big boards. It's free and available wherever you get your podcast. We have Jeremy Woo on tomorrow. He came up with my favorite mock draft so far that I've seen this offseason. So we're going to talk with him more about the draft. We'll give you a couple of segments and then follow up with our thoughts on what Jeremy Woo had to say. So stick around tomorrow. This week, we got a bunch of great stuff coming at you on the Locked On Hornets podcast, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network.